Good morning, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very thrilled and also honored to welcome Her Excellency Dr. Hala H, Egypt's Minister of Economic Planning and Chair of Egypt's Sovereign Wealth Fund. Her Excellency Elsaid previously served as the Minister of Planning, Monitoring, and Administrative Reform between February 2017 and December 2019. Dr. Elsaid is also a prominent economist and a university professor. She was recognized as the best Arab minister by the Arab Government Excellence Award Committee in 2020. During her previous and current government roles, Dr. Elsaid initiated and successfully implemented the National Sustainable Development Strategy, Egypt's Vision 2030, through partnerships with bilateral and multilateral stakeholders, private sector leaders, and civil society specialists, in line with the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and also the Africa 2063 Agenda. Welcome, Your Excellency. In recent years, Egypt has made significant progress with macroeconomic reforms, helping strengthen growth and reducing unemployment. As a result, some economic sectors witnessed significant growth, including the ICT, financial, and renewable energy sectors. After the success of the first phase of the economic reform program in 2016, the Egyptian government launched the National Structural Reform Program, known as NSRP, in 2021, with focus on three main pillars. First, expanding national production in the agriculture, manufacturing, and ICT sectors. Second, promoting exports, especially within the African continent. And third, fostering human development through multiple initiatives, including Hayat Karima and Takaful wa Karama. The second phase of the reform plan is also focused on the transition towards green economic development and improving the country's resilience to climate change. As is well known, Egypt will host COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in just a couple of weeks, and the main focus of the event is on Africa and providing solutions for climate resilience. We are very honored to host Dr. Hala H today, who will now discuss the recent economic developments in the country and the main highlights of the economic reform plan. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, it's a great pleasure to be with you here today, and I'd like to start by expressing my appreciation to the Atlantic Council, organizers, members, and guests for inviting me to this important event. Actually, the Council has always played a pivotal role over time in providing an effective platform for constructive dialogue between policymakers. Let me start by saying that we are all witnessing very unprecedented times. It's a very complex political and economic landscape, and policymakers for sure have to navigate through this landscape as it is characterized by multiple crises. Definitely, when the pandemic started, a year and a half ago, and we were just getting out or just recovering out of the pandemic when we were hit by the geopolitical challenges. And this had actually multiple complex situations, especially for emerging economies. It is the repercussions are much more acute for emerging economies. And let me just highlight that for the emerging economies, we were just facing global disruption of the supply chain. This has affected heavily prices of main strategic products, basically oil and food. And then when the geopolitical challenges hit, inflation became much higher. Developed countries started curbing this inflation by raising interest rates in order to curb the inflation, and this increased borrowing costs for developing and emerging economies, and also it have put a lot of pressures on the liquidity, on their balance of payment, on the borrowing cost for these countries. So this basically have all led to the IMF yesterday started projecting the global growth to decrease by about 2.3%. Also a projection of a loss of about 4 trillion between now and 2026. Also, the risks of stagflation are rising as inflation elevates and economic activity is slowing down, and the implications also is extremely acute for emerging economies. If we look at the situation in Egypt, Egypt, within this murky situation, we always perceive the prevailing situation as an opportunity to vitalize our efforts in Egypt and to address bottlenecks and structural imbalances. As we know, we have finished the first phase of the economic reform program that was supported with the IMF, and we finished this successfully. At that time, we had the fiscal space to support the economy during the COVID pandemic. We gave a lot of institutions delay and postponing their taxes. We gave a lot of support through the Central Bank of Egypt by giving them some liquidity to support the sectors that had lockdown, like the tourism sector. So a lot of support due to the fiscal space and due to the successful program, the fiscal and the monetary program that was supported by the IMF at that time. We found during the pandemic, we found that this is a great opportunity to embark on the structural part of the economy. For the first time, we worked on the second phase of the reform, which is the structural part of the economic reform program. This structural part, as you were mentioning, Dr. Rasha, is basically focused on 4 main pillars. The first one is increasing the weight of the real side of the economy. So we're focusing more on enhancing the weight of manufacturing, agriculture, and ICT in order to enhance the resilience of the economy and the competitiveness and the export-led sector of the economy. The other one is, of course, investing in human capital through capacity building program, through increasing the safety net program, and also embarking on different developmental programs like the Haya Karima and the Family Development Program. The third one is working on the efficacy and the flexibility of the labor market in Egypt. And why the labor market in Egypt? Because we are a country that has 103 people with a very populous country, and 60% of this population are young people under the age of 30. So it is very important to work on the supply side and the demand side of the labor market. We usually used to work on the demand. You know, the demand side is very dynamic. Technology has impacted a lot the demand side, but we never worked on the supply side of the labor market. So it was very important in the structural reform agenda to embark on the supply side of the labor market. So we worked on enhancing the technical and vocational part, working on with the Ministry of Higher Education on different programs for the multidisciplinary specialities, also changing the mindset of the public, because the mindset of the public towards the technical education was one of the main hurdles of this issue. So we worked on having accredited technical education, having sector skills council in order to guarantee having a real quality technical education and having this aligned with the private sector needs and with the private sector agenda. The fourth pillar of the structural reform is enhancing the role of the private sector, because, as you know, the government after 2011 have intervened heavily in the economy in order to upgrade the level of the infrastructure. Between 2011 and 2014, there was basically, we suffered from political instability, the government had to intervene at these few years to pitch in public investment in order to upgrade the level of infrastructure, in order to provide a better quality of life for our citizens, and also to prepare an infrastructure that is attractive for the private sector. No private sector will come to a country with no road networks, with no ports, with no electricity. So we had to upgrade the level of infrastructure in order for this infrastructure to be attractive for a private sector. As a result of this, of all these efforts, the Egyptian economy grew for the past fiscal year by 6.6%. This is the highest economic growth since 2008. Also, this was coupled with a decent unemployment rate, because as you all know, growth is important, but it's not enough. We need to have this growth that is coupled with unemployment, and we had a decent unemployment rate that reached 7.2%. The growth came from where? The growth was propelled from different sectors, from ICT that grew by 16.5%, from Suez Canal that grew by 12%, manufacturing grew by 10%, also a rebound of the hospitality sector after the COVID-19 pandemic grew by 45%, in addition to growth in education, in construction, and health sector. It is also important to note that we also had an FDI recorded an increase of 80% from 5.2 billion last year. This year we're reaching almost 9 billion FDI. The other important thing is that the second pillar is investing in human capital. And as you know, and as I said, of course, upgrading our human capital is the bedrock of an effective and inclusive development plan. And of course, it is aligned with our Agenda 2030. We increased massively the conditional cash transfer program. And here it is important to note that in the first phase of the economic reform program, we rationalized our subsidy program. Our fuel subsidy program that used to go 70% of this subsidy, of the fuel subsidy, used to go to the richest 30% of the population. So the saving of the subsidy program was transferred to the less privileged people of the economy, the poorest people, in a cash transfer program. So we provided them with a program called Takaful and Karama. And this year, in order to weather the impact of the inflationary pressures, we increased the number of beneficiaries of the cash transfer program to almost 1 million families in this program. Also, one of the main developments in the human capacity and human development programs was the embarking of a program that I think it is the biggest developmental program worldwide, which is the Hayat Karima, or the Decent Life Initiative. We thought that the monetary poverty is not enough. We need to work on the multidimensional poverty. And working on the multidimensional poverty means we work on the different services and availability of services for all our people. So we embarked on a program. It's called Decent Life, where we provide decent services to more than 50% of our people. 60 million Egyptians are receiving, or will, some of them already received and the others will receive. We worked on 4,500 villages to provide them with sewage, with water, housing, decent housing, medical, and of course sports, fiber optics. All type of services will reach these people. We worked on the villages, on the rural side of the country. And of course, this is addressing the multidimensional poverty through a comprehensive service-oriented approach. The initiative targets 4,500 Egyptian villages to become sustainable rural communities. The program was awarded from the UN as one of the international best practices of the Sustainable Development Goals as it addresses the 17 SDGs in its perspective. What is important to note is that we, of course, monitoring the impact of this program on the people. We finished the first phase of this program. It's going to be finished by December 2022 or January 2023. And by finalization of the first phase, the people accessibility of their services will increase from 30% to 90%. So this increase in availability and accessibility of services, the 60% increase, in normal times used to take not less than 7 to 10 years for people to spread investment in order to pitch investment, in order for them to upgrade the level of accessibility and availability of services. The other important human capital program is called a family development program. This family development program that we initiated last year, for the first time, it is tackling the issue of the birth control from a developmental perspective. You know, we have a high fertility rate in Egypt, and of course, it is important that we start having a sort of a birth control, yet we are investing in the characteristics of our people. So this program takes at its heart women, economic and social empowerment, realizing the importance and immense potential of changing women's long-held beliefs and aspirations to allow them to grow and prosper, and to the impact of women on the life of the families and on the life of the society. This program, of course, is aligned with health services, raising awareness, digitization systems, in addition to introducing for the first time a deferred financial incentive scheme for women that abide by all the medical, health, and, of course, the full parameters of the program. In addition to that, also we invest a lot in capacity building. We have launched a capacity building program through two training arms, the National Institute of Governance and Sustainable Development and the National Training Academy. These programs offer a lot of programs with renowned institutions like King's College, like University of Chicago, like Minnesota. Among these programs are programs for women leadership and Be Sustainable Development Ambassador. Among this program is widespread among young people and among students and young professionals. The fourth pillar is the private sector engagement. And as I mentioned, there was a dire need at a certain period of time for public investment after the political turmoil. We delivered a lot of projects to upgrade the level of infrastructure, but now it is, of course, we're paving the way for the private sector to play a more role in the society. It is also important to note that according to the latest economic census, private sector contribution to the economy reached about 72% of our GDP. According to that, we started working on different incentives for the private sector, different incentives for localization of industries, for green projects, of course, that affects more sustainable projects that have more sustainable impacts on for the future generations. Also, we have established what we call a state ownership policy, which identifies the directions of involvement of the state in the economy and manages this involvement. All the structural reform agenda was done through a participatory approach. We have done this in collaboration with the private sector through a different public dialogue. The government was the coordinator, but it was basically academia, think tanks, private sector, business community, business council that used to recommend and give all their ideas. So this all had been done through a nationwide public consultation. Finally, we have established the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Egypt. This that I proudly chair as a non-executive chairman. This Sovereign Wealth Fund is basically one of the investment arms of the government. Its main role is to crowd in private sector and to utilize the country's unutilized assets and to unleash the potential and unlock value for a lot of assets that the country has. So we have different sub-funds that we have initiated. One of them is basically focused on pharmaceutical and medical investment. The other one is in utilities. The third is in cultural. And the fourth is in fintech. And the fifth that we just initiated a few weeks ago is the pre-IPO fund, where we prepare public stakes of the government and we prepare them for the IPO, because the situation globally and nationally is not the best for the public offering. So let me give you just a brief idea about the main projects that have been done. It's basically, we have projects in the renewable energy. We have a lot of projects in the green hydrogen. Egypt has all the ingredients for renewables. We have the sun, we have the weather, we have the wind. So we are involved in a lot of projects with different consortia on renewables and windmills and green ammonia. We have also different projects on water desalination is another area that the private sector is engaged in. We have made a bid and we received 200 proposals from almost 30 different countries. There is also, we're involved in upgrading one of the cultural areas behind the citadel through also an international consortium that is going to transfer this area to an innovation and creativity hub. We have also launched a bid on one of the oldest administrative building in Egypt, which is Mugamma al-Tahrir, and the bid, one of the American consortium that have done the London House in Chicago have won this bid. So a lot of projects. Also one of the very important projects that is close to my heart is localizing of train industry in Egypt with a consortium of the big 4 private sector companies in Egypt and one of a technology partner that is a Korean technology partner, in order to localize the industry of transportation and NERIC. It's a National Egyptian Railway Industry Egypt. So this is in a nutshell what the fund is doing. Finally, of course, I cannot end without saying that the Egyptian government is accelerating green-driven recovery, and climate action is at the heart and the core of the government's agenda. We are hosting, of course, the COP27 is approaching, and all the government are mobilizing efforts for the preparation of this. Of course, as you know, this is a COP from pledges to implementation, so we are looking forward to have a lot of projects on ground. We have 10 thematic days, and that will witness multiple events. One of the very important events that we are launching as a Ministry of Planning, in addition to the Solutions Day that we are responsible of, one of them is Decent Life for Resilient Africa and Greening the National Investment Plan. All these will be done with our friends and partners from the African nation in order to make sure that we have development projects that are inclusive and sustainable. I hope I didn't take too much time, and thank you all for listening.
This has been wonderful. Thank you. And I think everyone has really witnessed the consequences of the reform program, especially the first part in terms of macroeconomic stabilization, streamlining of public spending. And then at the same time, recently the World Bank has been warning, issued a final report with increasing records of debt to GDP in the entire region, not just in Egypt, but Egypt is one of them. And based on the World Bank and IMF statistics, public debt is reaching a level of 80% of GDP in Egypt with a cost of foreign debt servicing in 2023 alone that is estimated at 16 billion US dollars. So how does Egypt plan to control the escalating debt crisis, which obviously will have implications on the fiscal policy, etc.?
Well, we have a plan for a four-year plan, a medium-term plan for decreasing the public debt through increasing revenues and at the same time rationing the expenses. One also of the very important things is, and I think this was announced yesterday, is the decrease in the growth of the external debt. We have a committee that we also proudly chair that is looking into all external debt, all foreign debt that comes to the country, and having certain criteria in order to select what is really core and what is needed to the economy, having a technological component or having a foreign component in it, and of course to be within the 2030 agenda and within the priorities of the government. On another side, we are also working in order to increase our foreign exchange receipts from different sources other than the debt. Of course, as you have seen, the Suez Canal economic revenues are increasing heavily due to the expansion that happened in the Suez Canal and also due to the incentives that the Suez Canal have given to different clients. We're also working on increasing exports, which has already increased 53% this last year. And we're also working through the structural reform agenda to increase exports, more specifically the exports that have high technological components, so they are more competitive. We also increased FDI, as I mentioned, from 5 billion to 9 billion. And through different initiatives through the Sovereign Wealth Fund, we're also working to increase foreign direct investment more in order to make sure that we have our targets for the public debt aligned with the strategy, and also for the external debt also aligned with to decrease external debt to exports and to GDP.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for this excellent session. We really enjoyed it. And thank you, everyone, for joining this important session. As we all know, Egypt is a strategic MENA country with a large market of 100+ million people and a great economic potential. The world will be looking forward to watching COP27, and we wish you the best of luck for that. And thank you very much again. Until very soon.